Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan, brought to you by the Hockey News. With over 2 million dedicated readers, the Hockey News, established in 1947, is the authoritative source of hockey and the number one hockey publication in North America. With an ever-growing podcast network and a video database on top of an already established print and digital brand, the Hockey News is there to cover all major sports stories from around the world. Visit thn.com/deal to get the best value and subscription to the Hockey News. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan, and with me, as always, my winger, Ricky Squid 5. Squid, we're now down to 2, and at first blush, as any indication, it looks like a very promising for a terrific final between Tampa and Dallas.
Oh, boy, I tell you, it could be. I mean, the downfall for Tampa could be the injuries they're racking up, and guys are getting nicked up and hurt. Cirelli going down last night. He did finish the game and score the game winner, but those things, the further you go on, and Dallas is a pretty big physical team, that could play into the finals, but it's kind of nice to see those two teams in the finals. Neither one of them have won. Well, Dallas has won one cup quite a while ago, and
Tampa won one too.
And Tampa won one, but not since 84 or 94. So I mean, it's great.
2004.
2004. Yes, you're correct. Yeah, I'm bad with dates. I don't remember them that well, but anyway, no, it should be exciting. I mean, it is a Stanley Cup final, and let's hope it goes 6-7 games because. I think they're both good teams. They're both well coached. And I think if you look at the depth, I think you probably have to give the edge to Tampa. But I thought that about Vegas over Dallas as well. And look what happened there. So,
well, the turnaround in Dallas is nothing short of remarkable. When I was following the Leafs 2 years ago, I remember going into Dallas for the 4th game of the season. And this team, they looked hopelessly lost. They were a one-line team that looked like they were going through the motions. The fans walking in the rink looked like they were walking a death plank. There was zero buzz in the city about the team. It had all the hallmarks of a franchise just headed for disaster from top to bottom. And they just seemed to persevere and seemed to just push along. And all of a sudden now, leadership coming from Jamie Benn, who's now emerged as a Conn Smythe candidate, and they got phenomenal goaltending out of Kobaden. I just butchered that name, I'm sure, which is always the need to win. And they're suddenly all of a sudden in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, give Jim Nill a lot of credit. I think
Absolutely
the way they've drafted. I mean, if you look at their defense, those guys are all drafted. Heiskanen, their whole defense are solid, and they're all draft picks. And then he adds Pavelski and what's his name?
Corey Perry.
Corey Perry, two guys that have experience of winning a Stanley Cup. And, so I think you got to give Jim Nill a lot of credit. And then, it was circumstances beyond what he could do when he had to get rid of Montgomery, unfortunately. It was, I think it was something Jim or Nill had to do because of the circumstances, but Bowness has taken over, and he's brought that team this far, and he turned everything around.
Well, he's the feel-good story of the NHL this year. Certainly, Rick Bowness, and everybody just loves the guy. And we can't ignore Tampa also, who you mentioned at the beginning of the call that they're beat up. They're missing some key players like Stamkos. Hedman, I'm sure, is not 100%, although he's certainly not playing like it. He's playing like a Norris Trophy winner. Point just can barely stay in a lineup. He's so beat up. And I'm sure they got lots of other guys that are the same way, but they're getting the same thing. They're getting elite goaltending from Vasilevsky, and they look almost unstoppable at this point in time. But if one team matches up well against them, I'd say it looks like it's Dallas.
Yeah, I would have to think I would rather see a Vegas-Tampa final, only because I think it'd be a little bit more kind of run and gun and speed, and they'd be up and down the ice like crazy, where Dallas is more of a kind of, they're like the Islanders, I guess. They kind of just sit around and they just wait for their opportunities, and then they pounce on them. And they're a very opportunistic team. And they did that against Vegas. Vegas outplayed them pretty much every single game.
Mm-hmm.
And they just kind of hung around, 1-1, 1-0, and then all of a sudden, bang, bang, and they're up 2-1, and then they hold on and they win. So, but I wish it was Vegas. I think it'd be a little more exciting. I think it'd be a little bit more offense, but it still should be a very, very good series, I think.
Well, the games are getting better every night, and you'd never know these guys are playing in a bubble just from the level of play that just seems to be increasing, accelerating. So we're pretty excited as hockey fans that this is going to be a terrific final. So we'll watch with lots of interest, yeah.
But the bubble thing I like because I just saw that they announced that the 2021 World Juniors will be played in a bubble in Edmonton. So they're already preparing for what's probably going to come next, I guess, down the road with coronavirus. So they've got their ducks in a row and they're getting all ready and to make sure that the World Juniors does happen.
Exactly. So we will definitely be watching with lots of interest. And, moving in Leafland, we finally got a little bit of on the coaching news, and it's interesting. It's a nice segue into our guest we have today, the second part of our interview with Bruce Boudreau. And we talk about his coaching career. But it looks like the Leafs have landed a guy who was pretty much in demand, Manny Malhotra from Vancouver, who was on the bench. I thought a little strange that he would take a bit of a sideways move, it looked like, to be an assistant in Toronto. He already had that position in Vancouver, and pretty much the same type of scenario. And it looks like he wants to come home is one of the things, but there was a number of teams after him.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. I thought too, Mike, because he said, like, I want to go to a team. I'm going to a team that has a lot of, good young players and everything. Well, if you look at Vancouver, they're exactly the same. They've got some fantastic young players.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're going to be a good team going forward, just like the Leafs probably will. But you're right. It's kind of a sideways move in all aspects.
But you never know. Maybe there was some other, maybe he gets a little more responsibility, or maybe there's a couple additive incentives for him or something in lines. But again, we'll watch again with interest, as we always do with further developments. And I would have picked that Boudreau would have been the candidate they probably would have preferred to have. But I think in one aspect, it might have been unfair to Keith to have a guy with that stature standing beside him, because especially if they got off to a little bit of a slow start, it would almost be a death sentence for him, and it wouldn't really be fair.
Well, I guess my big question on that is, I think now most teams, the coach picks one assistant and management hires the other assistant. So Malhotra is whose pick? Is it management or is it the coach? And if it is the coach, maybe that played into it. The fact that Bruce is, a proven NHL head coach, and you don't want someone looking over your shoulder who's been there before and done that. And, I know from talking to a lot of people I've coached in different levels of hockey that the last thing they want is someone looking over their shoulder that's already been there and done that, because it can be a little uncomfortable.
Well, you're a player yourself. Look at what if they get off to a slow start, and the players start listening to the coaches? Who are they looking at for instruction? They look into the guy in charge currently, or they look into the guy that's probably going to step into his job. So you know how it works. It's like that in any line of work or any business, or I don't care where you are. You're going to go, the guy who's on the sinking ship, you're looking the other way. You're looking at the guy who's on the raft and is headed to the big boat, okay? So
Absolutely. Because you know that he's going to be the next guy, and you want to make sure that he likes the way you're playing, because you know that your ice time is going to depend on that. So, yeah, absolutely. So, it's not a bad thing. Gabby, I know he's been an assistant coach probably somewhere along the way, but he's primarily been a head coach. And, I'm not sure. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't want the assistant's job there. I'm not really sure.
Well, as a good lead-in, let's go and find out, because we do talk about that on our segment with Gabby. And without further ado, let's turn it over to him. Let's listen to what he has to say about coaching. I spoke to a mutual friend of ours the other day, Jeff Green, and he had some very nice things to say about you when you guys played together as 16-year-olds with the Markham Waxers and the Marlies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he pointed out about you, and Rick and I talked about this earlier today, was that you had such a way as being one of the stars in the team, but you made everybody in that team feel important, that their contribution was significant for the team to have success. And you went so far as to make Jeff give himself a nickname, which he called himself Turk after Derek Sanderson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that has stuck with him his whole life. And he said this sort of personality you had and this positive attitude you had just sort of showed the way you were. So, I mean, you've just kind of touched on it. You went from player to coaching. Was coaching something you had in the back of the mind at some point, or you thought you could possibly do?
I was the player assistant coach for St. Catharines in the American League in the early 80s for 3 years with Doug Carpenter. And then I went to Fort Wayne. I was the player assistant coach in Fort Wayne for 3 years. And so it was definitely what I wanted to do. I didn't know what else to do. When in 87, I think it was, after my Springfield Newmarket year, my wife said, "That's it, I'm not moving anymore." So I tried to get a job as the director of personnel for the city. And my sister-in-law made up a resume that I didn't even recognize who it was. But I was one of one of three guys to get interviewed. And the interviewer who was retiring was the lacrosse coach in St. Catharines. So I'm sure that's the sports thing, And he came in and he said, "Well, I hear you do contracts." And he says, "Because you're going to have to do contracts with the unions and everything else." And I said, "Mr. Brady," I said, after about 10 minutes, I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I can't do any of this. So I'm just taking myself out of the equation." And that's when I knew it was either coaching or bust. If I wasn't going to do that, I was going to be a greeter at Walmart my whole life. So I got lucky in the coaching, and I haven't had to do that.
Well, Gabby, let me touch on that too.
Yeah.
About, somebody saying that about you when you played with them, and at a young age. And I found out when I got into coaching too, and I was lucky, like you were, that I kind of went from playing right into coaching. And mind you, I only coached for 8 years, and you coached a lot longer than I did. But that was one of the things I think probably that made you a good coach, was the fact that you made everybody on the team feel like they were all the same, like they were all as important as the next guy. And I think that's so important as a coach, and young coaches today that may be listening have to realize that even your fourth line, your penalty killers, they need to know that whatever they're doing and their job, their role is just as important as the guys that are scoring the goals. And that was one of the things that I read a lot of books before I get into coaching, psychology and that sort of thing. And that was one of the things in the books, in sports psychology books that I read. And it really, really helped me a lot to recognize that, player A and player B have different roles, but you got to make them all feel like they're just as important as the next guy. Would you agree with that? Or
I agree 100%, because when I was playing and I was in the NHL, the coaches never talked to you at all. I mean, they talked to you to send you down. And I remember whether it was Mike Nicholick or Floyd Smith or Roger would be the only person that really talked to you. But you never knew whether you were doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And I made a point of saying to myself that I was always going to make, if I got to be coach, I want to make these fourth line guys feel as important as the first line guys, because that's the way you win. If you don't make them feel important, then they won't care whether you win or lose. They'll just look for they'll hope that they have a job. But so I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, it's our job as coaches to make sure everybody feels important, everybody has a role, and they stick to that role.
Now, you're a pretty outgoing guy, Gabby, as we can tell, and any of the viewers can tell listening to you, and anybody who knows you. So for you to make that transition from, this is two questions here, for you to make that transition from player to coach is obviously, and Squid, you can jump in here too, because it's obviously something difficult you have to do, or maybe it's not difficult to do. But did you have to put some hard and fast restrictions on yourself as far as getting too close to a player or players, or even just as doing something simple as having a beer with a guy?
Yeah, I really did, and I came to the conclusion right away that, I mean, I can be friendly, but I can't be your friend. That was what I was saying, and I can never go out drinking with you anymore. It's all business at the rink, because I've had to sit out guys that I played with 2 years before, and because I caught them out for curfew. And it was the toughest thing, because they were great friends of mine and they begged me not to do it. And you don't want to do it. But then the thing that you think is, these are, if I want to coach, I have to do this. And I'd start to walk out of the room and I didn't want to do it because it's a hard thing to do. And then you'd stop and you'd say, no, I got to do it. And you'd turn back and you'd go do it. So it was a real difficult thing, because especially in my first couple of years, I wanted to go out with these guys after the game, because I missed going out with you missed the camaraderie of your teammates. But you was steadfastly, I couldn't do it. And a couple of them have since retired, and then you become friends with them. But couldn't be their friend during the season or when they were still playing for me.
Squid, how about you?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely right. And it was hard, very, very difficult, because you don't, especially when you go to the East Coast League where I started, and I didn't have an assistant coach my first year, have one trainer and a radio guy, and that's pretty much it. And it's very, very difficult to keep yourself away from going out and doing that. And the one thing I did do was, every day on the way to the rink, I picked 3 guys that I was going to have a conversation with. And it wasn't necessarily always about hockey. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. And the one thing I did was I wanted them to know that I cared, and I cared about them as people and as players. I never became their friends, obviously, and I wasn't going to be going out with them. But I just wanted them to know that I was there, and that if they needed anything, that I was available. And I think that went a long way. But some of those guys that I talked to that I cared about, I had to cut, I had to trade, and that's always very difficult. So you can't, as Bruce said, you can't become real friendly with anybody, because you're going to have tough decisions to make with those guys. That makes it that much more difficult if you become friends.
Well, longtime baseball manager Billy Martin, we all know, and we all watched him with some of his antics over the years with the Yankees. He actually summarized coaching or managing down to this simple phrase. And he said, you have a 25-man roster and 15 guys will go through a wall for you. 5 guys absolutely hate your guts. And there's 5 guys on the fence. So your job as the manager is to make sure the 5 guys who hate your guts never talk to the guys who are on the fence.
That's a good line.
And does that pretty much sum it up?
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible to please everybody. I have it right in on my wall in the coaching room everywhere I go. It says, I may not know the secret to winning, but I know the secret to losing is trying to be nice to everybody. And that's you can't do it. You're going to have to tick some people off to make the right decisions you feel as a coach. And unfortunately, it hurts people's feelings, and they think it's personal, but it's not personal. It never is.
And it's very, very difficult too. I mean, it's not easy, because these kids, well, in my case, they were all relatively. Jared Bednar was one of the guys that played for me and won the championship that year. And it's so difficult, because these are human beings, and they're trying to reach their goals as a hockey player. And sometimes you feel horrible when you have to do something, but then you shut the door of your office and you sit there, and then you realize I did the right thing. He's going to be okay, and we're going to all move on. And that's the way you have to kind of focus on it and stay that way.
Well, I think that's the way you have to be. And I think, Gabby, this one goes right along the same lines as what we've been talking about here is the fact, how long before you realized you had to develop a thick skin to deal not only with the media, but also with players? Because remember, now you're on the other side, and even Rick, this is you too. And you're the guy now who's getting talked about behind his back when guys are out having beers and cutting up the coach.
You know what? I don't know if I ever go. You have to have a thick skin, but it's. I always. I didn't know if I had one or didn't because I would worry like crazy at home, and I'd worry whether I'm doing the right thing. I never, walked around with my chest out and said, "Hey, I don't care what you think. This is the way I'm doing it." I was never like that. I think I was really, into what they felt and didn't want anybody to feel bad, but you can't make everybody happy.
Well, you, much like your playing career, you traveled the ECHL, the AHL, and you put the time in and you were coaching. Did you ever think that maybe that call wasn't going to come to the big team?
I said to myself, if I was 55 years old and still coaching in the minors, I don't think I'd ever get a chance in the NHL. I was 53 when I got the opportunity. Never took anything for granted. I was always so worried. When I got called up to coach Washington, the first thing I asked George McPhee is, I know it's an interim job, George. Do I still have my job in Hershey when this ends? And he said, yes, for sure, because I had just signed a 4-year deal, the longest I'd ever done in my life. And I wanted that. I wanted to make sure that was going to be fun. And then unfortunately, fortunately, I guess, we just started winning right off the bat, and it became, and it ended up being till today.
Well, I just want to go back to that just before that, September the 11th, 2001. Everybody will live in that, that tragic day forever. You were almost one of the casualties yourself. And
it's quite a story, actually. Andy Murray, we were all scheduled to come, Ace Bailey and myself, we flew together a lot. He was from Boston. I was living in Manchester.
This was with LA right at the time.
With LA, I was with the LA organization. And that weekend, Bill O'Flaherty, who was the director of player development, his daughter got married in Lake Placid. So me and Ace went up there together, and we drove home, and I got the call that Andy Murray wanted me to come up on the Monday, and that the team services guy was going to change the ticket. And I tried to get Ace to change his, but it was too expensive on their budget for him to change their tickets. So we had because Andy wanted a coach's dinner before training camp started on the Tuesday. Mm-hmm. So obviously I went up there on the Monday, and the incident, September 11th, happened on the Tuesday. Problem is, I didn't tell my kids that I was going up on the Monday that I'd changed my ticket. And they ran out of school in St. Catharines when they started seeing the Twin Towers and that. And like, I still get goosebumps when I tell that story, because they went right home and phoned my wife, and they were all bawling. And when she was phoning me about it, I was bawling. And, my two good friends, Mark Davis and Ace Bailey, died in that. And, but I'll ever be grateful for Andy Murray to have a coach's dinner, which is why every training camp, I make sure the night before I have all the assistants and everybody over to the house, or we go to a restaurant and have a coach's dinner.
Well, I know
that was a very difficult day. Mark Davis played for me in South Carolina with his twin brother, Mike. Mm-hmm. And, and of course, Ace Bailey, I didn't know real well. I had met him a few times, but that was a tough day. And it's one of those things that you're going to probably remember for a long, long time.
Well, I know I read a story about Wayne Gretzky, and he took it right to heart like everybody else did, but particularly with Ace Bailey, because he actually got him the job with LA. So he took that real personal himself. Now, on the back of all that, obviously emotionally and spiritually, maybe even this may have had some effect in you, but did you actually, because you're a very upbeat person, did you actually take that, like to appreciate what you had? Obviously, your life was saved, but the fact that instead of feeling any resentment for not being called up, did you use that sort of as a motivation to work even harder to get yourself that promotion?
Um, it's a hard question to answer. I don't really recall, except I was so grateful that I was
Yeah.
still alive,
Yeah.
I just since that time I always thought when it's my time, it'll be my time, and you just sort of live life to the fullest as much as you can after that. I mean, those are things that. I mean, so much has happened in my life from 2000, September 11th, that 2001 till now. Like, I mean, I am just so blessed that I was lucky enough to not get on that plane and still be here today.
So what about, take us through the day you got the call from George finally?
Well, the day we had won the Calder Cup 2 years before, and then we'd lost in the finals the last year. So this year, we're going, and I didn't even think about Washington was in last place, and initially Doug Yingst phoned me up at 6:00 in the morning, and I'm going, what the hell are you phoning me this early for? And he says, listen, I just wanted to let you know George McPhee is going to call you in 5 minutes. Be ready for the phone call. And I said, okay. So George called me up and he said, Bruce, are you okay with coaching the Washington Capitals? I said, are you kidding me? I couldn't believe he was actually saying this to me. And I said, yes, absolutely. George, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And he says, I want you to be here. We practiced at 11 o'clock this morning. And me and my wife hung up the phone, went into my son's room. All three of us were jumping on the bed like it was a trampoline, laughing and going crazy. And I got lost going to Washington, thought I was going to be late. I was such a basket case going there. But it was sort of a funny day because I went up there and the first person I had met was Brooks Lake, who I'd coached the previous year or two in Hershey. And he says, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. George just asked me to come up here. And so I went into my office and had the meeting with George and talked to the assistants. And I said, well, what did Glenn do? Well, let's, just put a practice together and do the same stuff. And so we did. And then I went back to my office and I said, the hell with it. I said, I'm going to do this my way. What's the worst that can happen, right? We're in dead last place in the NHL, and I'm supposed to be doing this for just in terms. So I changed everything, changed all the systems and everything in that one practice. Went out there. I called out Ovechkin my first practice to show the guys that I had the nerve to do that, and then everything went pretty smoothly after that.
So, well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, did you address the team that day, obviously on the ice? You being a player yourself, you've been in that position yourself, watching new coaches come in and address teams. What was your sense? Were you getting any sort of vibes from the body language of these guys? Were they looking at you with any kind of respect, or thinking, who is this guy?
No, they were pretty excited, actually, because I had 7 players that I coached on the Calder Cup championship team. And I knew we were all really tight, and so those guys, I'm sure, as soon as they heard the news or as soon as I was out of the room, guys were asking them, what's this guy like? And they would have said really positive things about me. And so I think I had that going in. They were, in last place, and I came in with an awful lot of positivity, I think. And I think they liked that because they were being beat up a little bit. And we won our first game in Philadelphia, and then, the rest was history for that year.
Well, I think they probably were pretty happy when you come up, because I don't think I've ever seen anybody that was more positive than you on a day-to-day basis. Playing with you, watching you coach. I mean, yeah, I see when you get down sometimes you're losing or whatever, but you always seem to be a very, very positive individual, and I'm assuming that had a lot to do with your success as a coach, more than likely.
I'm hoping it did. I mean, every day, no matter how bad things went the night before, I mean, I was always in the dressing room talking to I made a point of reaching out and talking to everybody every day. in the room, seeing how they were doing this and that, and saying, let's get going. We had a crappy day yesterday. Forget it. Today's a different day. Let's go. Let's get on the right foot, and let's have a great practice, and let's go after them again. And I just think that's my personality, is being pretty positive. So I mean, it worked out, and hopefully it gets a chance to work out again.
Well, I remember seeing an interview and you right around, you guys were starting to win a little bit in Washington, and I think you got to about 14th place. And you may not remember this, but I thought it was just hilarious. The journalist asked you a question about, was this a big game? You talked about being a big game, and you said, oh, why? Because it's a good motivator for your team and try to get some positive energy. You said, and you immediately looked at him and said, no, because the way the playoffs are shaping up, we could meet them in the second or third round, and I want to be prepared for them. And this guy was and you were in 14th place. You're in the playoffs yet, but your attitude was so positive that you were going to be there. You didn't even give it a second thought. And I remember a couple of days later, listening to the Bill Waters show driving home, he talked about that interview on the air, and somebody brought it up, and he said, listen, let me tell you one thing. Never underestimate Gabby, and don't bet against him, because that's all I can tell you about him.
Well, Bill's a good friend, and he was my agent for many years, and I could tell more stories about Bill Waters helping me out and more problems than I had. So it's great that he said nice things like that.
Well, give us your top 3 moments or 3 things in your coaching career. I mean, in the NHL especially, never mind the minors. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but
no.
But what were your top 3 moments in the NHL as far as being a coach?
Well, I mean, the first year we had to win our last 7 games to win the division, and we did, to make the playoffs. I think, and Washington hadn't made the playoffs since '98, so that was a big deal. I mean, I remember being pretty pumped up about that. I remember, winning the second round and getting to play in the conference final against Chicago when I was in Anaheim was really exciting to me. And that year, the thing that, we started out 1-7-2, and I thought for sure I was going to get fired. And we ended up winning the conference, winning the Jennings, having the best penalty killing and the best power play in the league. I think that was always the most satisfying thing with me. The next year, going to Minnesota, we ended up with 106 points, and we were 4-10 in March. And if we had been 500 in March, we would have won President's Trophy. I always thought that was great. But I can tell you, there's so many good moments that I've had. They outweigh the bad. I've had 3 bad moments, and I was fired in all 3 of them. So I mean,
I was going to get to that, but I knew those would be the answers.
Yeah, but I mean, other than that, you know what? I love it, and it's one of the reasons that I want to keep doing it. I mean, I think I've got a lot of energy, and I may be getting a little bit older, but I think I identify with the kids more than I identify with the older guys, and it's something I just want to continue doing.
I mean, I know your
son is following in your footsteps.
Yeah, my son coaches in Fort Wayne, and I told him the other day, because of this COVID-19, I said, and the East Coast League might not start till who knows when.
Yeah.
And I said, you got to get used to moving, because if you've chosen this profession as what you want to do, there's going to be ups and downs, and let's just hope the ups outweigh the downs. But I mean, you want to do it for the rest of your life, be prepared to move, and you better have a good hockey wife, because that's an important thing, or just as important thing. But I think he's a really good coach. I could talk about him for a long time. I think he's on his way. He knows what he's doing, and anything I can do to help him, I will. Except be his assistant. I won't be his assistant.
Now, just on the coaching line. So first off, what do you think makes a good coach these days in the NHL?
Communication. I think we all know the same things. Everybody's talking about the Barry Trotz thing. Everybody teaches the same stuff. It's getting them to buy in to it and getting them to sort of throw their egos away a little bit to play the way you have to play to win. So, I mean, we all know that the X's and O's. I mean, that's pretty. There's not much difference in anybody there. Somebody might have a different neutral zone than you, but for the most part, we all know and teach the same stuff. But it's how you deal with players, how you handle the communication. I have a firm belief that there's 23 different players in the NHL on your team. You have 23 different personalities. You have to get to know each personality and make it work for you against them. In other words, if a guy is playing crappy and you yell at him, sometimes he goes right into a shell and he can't do anything. So you got to find out what makes him work. Like Mike Green, for example, was a great example. One night I yelled at him. I came right down the bench and yelled at him. He was done. So I knew that the following time that he was having a rough game, I'd go up to him, whisper in his ear, Mike, I really need you today. Come on, buddy. Give him a pat on the back. And he was fine after that, and he played well. So some guys need a kick in the butt. Some guys need a pat on the back. Some guys need fining. Some guys lose ice time. I mean, it's my job to find out what makes them be the best that they can be and use that against them.
Now, did you, from your past experiences and the way you were handled being brought up, did you use some of that to say, that was maybe, in your view, the wrong way to do things? Like I was put in a position to not succeed. I was almost put in a position where I had to prove myself, but failure was probably more going to be along the lines of what's going to happen. But this way, like you look at a young guy today, he comes up and he immediately plays with good players and he gets an opportunity. Would you use that as your philosophy as well?
Yeah, I mean, Rick said it earlier. You bring up guys for the position. If you've got you need a fourth line center.
Yep.
You got to bring up a fourth line center that's accustomed to that, a penalty killer. If you need a scorer, you bring up the best scorer. Yeah, same thing on defense. Whether it's a shutdown guy or an offensive guy. I mean, so you do that to the position. But I mean, I would immediately, when I'm bringing up the young guy coming in, I would put him and play him. And if he made a mistake, I'd say, don't worry about it. Let's get going. Let's keep going. I mean, you might not play the last 5 minutes of the game if it's a 2-2 game in an important battle, but I wanted to put him in important situations for a couple of reasons. One, to give him confidence, and two, to see if he could do it. Like I remember calling up this one guy who sat out in Vancouver this year. He wasn't playing in the playoffs, but he's signed by him. His name's Tyler Graovac. And I put him on against Winnipeg in the playoffs on a face-off in our zone. And he looked at me and he says, what are you doing putting me out in our zone? I'm no good in our zone. And I said, you win the face-off and get your butt back here. And but, I mean, I couldn't believe that he didn't think that he was good enough to play in that situation. So, I mean, you got to do those things.
Yeah, it's a fine line, Gabby, but I think you're right on 100%. I mean, you need to find that, and that's one of the things before I coached, like I said, I bought those books, sports psychology and regular psychology, really helped me identify a person's what made them tick, and it helped me identify that fairly quickly. So I knew whether I had to kick the guy in the butt or pat him on the back, and I thought that was probably my biggest strength when I coached. Unfortunately, I didn't get to coach that long, but my record was pretty darn good. But because I knew what to do with certain players, and I think that's the biggest thing. Communication is so important. You look at Rick Bowness the other night. I loved what he did with Corey Perry. Corey Perry is a veteran of however many you coached him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he took a stupid penalty and was kind of starting to go a little off the rails. And all Rick Bowness did, went down, put his arm around him, just said, hey, probably, I don't know exactly what he said, but he probably said, hey, we need you out here tonight. We don't need you in the box. Take it easy and do what you do best. And they won the hockey game. So, that's what it takes is communication. I think that word in itself, when you said that, registered right here, and that's what it's all about. Being a successful coach is being able to communicate with your players and your assistant coaches and your trainers and everybody in the organization. That's what makes you a good coach.
Well, yeah, we can see
Thank
that.
you.
And speaking of that, yeah, I mean, obviously you have that ability. So we'd be remiss, Gab, if we didn't ask what's in store for you. Hopefully in the future, is there Toronto possibly in the prospects?
Well, you know what? I want to coach in the NHL. I think my first goal is to be a head coach, but I have no problem being an assistant if I'm asked. I want to be. I mean, I think I'd have a problem in other cities, but if being asked in Toronto, I think it would be a great honor. But I think I'm still looking at the head coaching thing, hoping that it comes to fruition. I think I'm good enough. I think my record speaks for itself when it comes to that. There's just not that many jobs open right now, and hopefully I don't wish ill well on anybody, but the nature of the beast is people get let go, and I hope they think of me when they're going to do that, when they let somebody go.
Well, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be on everybody's list, Gabby. There's no question about that. You've had a great coaching career. Obviously, you're a great player. You didn't get the opportunity like the guys get today, like where coaches put them in positions to succeed. And I witnessed that. I didn't see that. You didn't get that opportunity like they do today. And I look back and I go, he could have been such a great player in the National Hockey League if he had been put with the right players, and you weren't. I was glad when you got your first coaching job in the NHL and you've gone on to be a great coach. So hopefully something comes along pretty soon.
Well, I'm hoping to. Believe me. Hey, go ahead, Mike.
No, it's good. No, I was just going to say to you, Gab, that I think one of the things that comes through loud and clear in anybody who speaks to you is the fact that, I mean, here's a guy, you could sit and you could actually be somewhat bitter for the way you were treated maybe at the National Hockey League level to some degree. Maybe a lot of it was brought on by yourself and maybe your lifestyle, and that's the way things were back in those days, and that's what people have to appreciate. But I think what comes through loud and clear is you've never let that judge anything of your thought process as far as dealing with players today. And if anything, it's a learning experience for you. And you've been, it sounds like you're very open-minded when you're dealing with your players.
I think I learned from everything. I mean, from every situation that happens, that's happened to me or happened in a coaching game. Those things, I can't remember what my wife made for breakfast yesterday, but I can remember anything in hockey. It's amazing. She says I got the worst memory in the world and then I'm losing it, but I know everything about hockey and nothing about life. I don't know why, but it is what it is. So
you're a lifer, that's why.
Yeah.
Gabby,
Hey, I got to tell one story.
I got
Go
the
ahead.
same problem.
Yeah.
Like she tells me something in the morning, but yet when I come home, I can remember every golf shot I hit for 18 holes.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you can remember that, but you can't remember to pick up the dry cleaning. Like,
I think all wives have that same line ready to go.
Yes. What were you going to say, Gabby?
I got one quick story before. I don't know how long we're going to go, but this is a great story.
Yeah.
Okay, like one thing when Rick moved to or when he's got to be an established star, still living in Scarborough. You know what? We joined. I mean, I'd already been on it for a couple of years. The Metro Ball Hockey League. Okay, and I asked Rick, and now he's the captain of the Maple Leafs, but Rick wanted to play. He was great like this, and one night we were playing, and we were playing a bunch of 18-year-old. A lot of Italians in it. So all their dads and moms were watching in the stands. I don't know if Rick remembers this.
Oh,
but
I remember.
They were chopping at us, and oh yeah, you guys are NHLers, blah, blah, blah. And then Rick got so ticked off, he jumped head first into their bench, and we started a big brawl. And I took him aside after the game. I says, I don't think you better play in this league anymore.
Well, I actually quit after that game.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I think I got suspended for 4 games. I said, I've had enough of this. It's not worth it. I do remember that though, Gabby. That was.
It was a lot of fun, and they were picking on you because I mean you're a Maple Leaf, and you were a major Maple Leaf, and I wouldn't have been able to take it either. Like they were easier on me because I was just sort of a minor league Maple Leaf. But
what I liked about that the most was it was good for conditioning because we had to run up and down the floor.
Yeah.
But when I loved when we got a power play because you and I played the point on the opposite sides. And we'd throw it across nice and slow, and then the one-timers, that ball would turn and twist, and we had a good time. It was a lot of fun. I wish I could have continued playing, but after that, I said, I think I'm done. I don't think I should play anymore.
No, it was an intelligent move because you were the captain of the Maple Leafs, and these guys were all picking on you. But it was fun. We would love, and if we didn't score with the ball curving like crazy, and it hit the goalie, it hurt like hell. And we used to laugh so hard. It was a great time. Great time.
Now, Gabby, now all your years of traveling, the players you played with hundreds of players, it sounds like over the years. A couple of the characters that stand out.
Thousands, maybe? No,
yeah.
A couple of the movie, going back to the movie, was there any hijinks or highlights you remember from the movie that were pretty funny when that was all going on?
Oh, there was a lot of them, but I'm not going anywhere near that.
Okay.
I can't tell those stories.
Dave told us a couple Dave told us a couple last week with Paul Newman and some of the hijinks they were playing on, jokes they were playing on guys all the time.
Well, he got to see Paul a lot more than I did. I mean, with me, the one great thing, like it's funny how you remember things. Dave asked me one night, he says,
well, if you ask my wife, I don't remember anything.
Yeah. he says to me, he says, you want to go see the dailies? And I didn't know what they were, but I guess what they are is what they showed, what they shot that day, and the director and Paul Newman would watch them in the evening. And I said, yes, I'd love to do that. So me and Dave Hansen and George Roy Hill and Paul Newman went and watched the dailies. And I remember distinctly, Paul Newman, he sat in the front row, obviously, and we were behind him. He turned around and he said, you know what? I just made a movie for the money called Judge Roy Bean. And it wasn't very good. But he says, this movie is going to be great. It's going to be hilarious. And I said, really? And yeah. And he said, yes, it is. So he knew his stuff. You know, I mean, it would, because the movies stood the test of time and it's still in the top 5 sports movies of all time, I think, if you ask anybody.
Well, how realistic, now we spoke to Dave, anybody, about how realistic was that towards some of the play? And again, you're a smaller guy playing in that league. You would see some of those assassins, skating around the ice.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you how close it was. We played, there was a team in the league called the Bose Geros, okay? Now, let alone the bus trip. But we played them one night, and we had to go from Johnstown to Cape Cod, which was 16 hours in a storm. And then in that, we got on the bus and went to Beauce, which is in Quebec, and it was a 13-hour drive. And they were sort of like undefeated at home. And we're playing there, and they've got they had all the penalty minute leaders like you saw coming out of the gate when Paul Newman is there. And they had this one guy, and Rick probably knows of him, Wally Weir, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I know that name.
And Wally Weir wore a toque on the ice. And if you knocked the toque off, you had to fight him. And so needless to say, he had a lot of room out there. And I remember we won the game and we skated backwards to the exit because we were afraid they were all going to jump us. I mean, there was an awful lot of Johnstown Jet stories, but I mean, there was like, this was coming on the heels of Johnstown winning it a couple years ago, which the movie was based on, on the toughness. And we still had all the Carlsons and Dave Hansen and every other tough guy in the world. But I was just a poor guy coming out of Toronto that played on a great team. And now I'm into this, and it was pretty nutso.
So, I mean, who were some of the other characters you ran across through those years, or you can remember some of the crazy guys? You
know what? When I played in Springfield, the Islanders, all they drafted was tough Western guys like Kerry Clark and Rod Dahlman, Mick Vukota. And, you know, these guys were as tough as They were, and if you ever want to, again, YouTube Fredericton Springfield Brawl, and you'll see them all. And I mean, Dale Henry headbutted Gilles Bilodeau. Do you remember that name,
I
Rick?
know that. I sure
Yes, I
do.
do.
Know that guy.
And he headbutted him, and blood started spewing like on the ice, like all over the place, and he couldn't stand up. And I'm going, my God, what are we doing? John Forsland was calling the game because he was our play-by-play guy, and he couldn't believe it. But we could talk. I'm sure Rick could. All about the brawls that we've seen, the characters that we've been through. I remember one fight against Maine Mariners where Eddie Johnson and Pat Quinn were at center ice, and they were the coaches, throwing punches, ripping their coats off. It was like, wow. Like, I mean, this is nuts.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember when I went to coach in the ECHL, and of course I played for John Brophy in Birmingham. The year before he was an assistant, they had Bilodeau beaten. Who was the guy from Toronto? Mike.
Which guy you talk? Steve Durbano.
Durbano.
They had Durbano?
They had Durbano. And then, of course,
Ogie Oglethorpe, yeah.
And all those guys are gone, and Broke becomes the head coach in Birmingham. So I had him there, and I had him in Toronto. So I'm coaching against him. I'm in Charleston, and he's in Norfolk. And I put out one of my guys that, came in a trade with Jared Bednar, actually, from Huntington. And he could play, but he was a big, tough guy. And Broke put his line out, and my tough guy and his tough guy fought. My guy beat the hell out of his tough guy. And then he starts coming around the glass. He wants to fight me. Like, what the hell is your problem, bro? He goes, you put your guy out after my guy. I go, no. I said, I had first change. I put my guy out, then you put your guy out. I can't help it if my guy beat your guy up. And then he was like going crazy. He was halfway around the glass. And then I think afterwards we went out for dinner, and it was all over. So that's the type of guy Brof was, though. He was a competitive guy, and he didn't like to lose, whether it was a fight or a game. And but I remember that day is like it was yesterday. But oh boy, I'll tell you, Wally Weir played in Quebec. I played against him in the WHA and then in the NHL. I think he was still there. I think my first year in the NHL, maybe first couple. He was tough. He was a little crazy too, as well. Most of those tough guys were.
Well, you know what? You get those stories. Like in the movie Slapshot, when the Indian guy comes up with the thing, that's like he's wearing that. You get knocked that off. I'm sure that Nancy Dowd, who was the screenwriter, got stuff like that from all these stories. So it was pretty cuckoo.
So let's go to the other side of this. And Gabby, how about from the coaching angle? Name a player or two that you may take great satisfaction or some satisfaction in the fact that you helped move them along and maybe made them a better player than they thought they might have been. And you can look back and take some credit for it.
Well, I think all those guys that I had in Washington that were Dave Steckel, Boyd Gordon, Brooks Lake, these kind of guys that they played and then they moved up, and Thomas Fleischman became mid-range stars in the NHL. I thought were really good. And I mean, I was lucky enough that George would listen back then. I said, we need Matt Hendricks. We need him. And we got him on a tryout. And I promised Matt that if he came on a tryout, I wouldn't let him get sent down. And he made the team, and he ended up having an 8 or 9 year career out of it. And that was great. We brought a guy that never played an NHL game, Quinton Lang, who played the year before, but was just a heart and soul type fourth line guy that you kind of need. And these are kind of guys, because coaches, I think they gravitate towards, they all love the stars. And I love Alex and Nick Backstrom and all of those guys and the Getzlaffs of the world, but it's the players that don't get the print or the paper and everything else, that work their ass off all day long and they don't ask for anything. Those are the players that I think coaches just want to have success. And those are the kind of guys like in Minnesota, Jared Spurgeon, I didn't help him get there, but these are kind of guys I would go through a wall with for. I really love Ryan Getzlaff, the Corey Perrys. Guys like, they were stars, but they were great for me because they helped me along. But I mean, the young guys that we brought up, Pat Maroon, Cam Fowler, all of these guys, I loved, there's very few guys that you really go home and you go, honey, if I could get rid of this guy in a minute, I'd get rid of him. But there's a couple, and I won't mention them, but every team has one or two. But I try to look at the guys that I really liked and really think I helped along the way play in the NHL that is much more satisfying.
Rick, anything before we let Gabby go?
It's funny you say that because, I think hockey in general, are the guys in the hockey business, players, coaches, are great people. And I think if you compare them to other sports, perhaps a little bit more down to earth. And I think you're absolutely right, though, Gabby. There's always one or two, but overall, you pretty much love every guy that's on your team. They go out, they work their tails off, and they do their job. And that's one of the things I love about the game of hockey.
So, Brucey, let's, we've taken up a lot of your time. Anything you want to leave us with before we depart?
Who won the Tour Championship? Do you have it on over there?
I haven't got it on yet.
No, I don't.
Well, Dustin Johnson had a 5-stroke lead.
Yeah, but he only had a 2-stroke lead when I got up here. So anyway,
okay.
That being said, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Anything I can always do to talk hockey, I love doing it, especially to mostly people around Toronto. It's always be home to me. If they ever let us get across the border, I'll be there again.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, well, listen, we want to thank you again. Squid, any final thoughts?
No, all I want to say, Gabby, is good luck. I hope you get a job soon. You're a great coach. I love playing with you. You're a great guy. And hey, I just want to see you behind a bench sooner rather than later.
Squid, Gabby never disappoints, and he certainly didn't this time. He gave us a nice, one of those guys I could say that you can listen to for hours and still wouldn't be enough. So speaking of coaching, obviously the Toronto job has now gone to Mahalter, and we recorded this before that was all decided and with Bruce's comments. But on the back of all that, one major coaching job was filled this week, and that was in Washington with Peter Laviolette. And that's a pretty experienced coach. But one of the things that I found interesting was the fact that it was a short-term contract. It was only 3 years, got $14 million, so that was nothing to sniff at. But I would say that in this win-now league of the NHL, the Caps management feels the clock's ticking, and they want to squeeze as much of the remaining drops of competitiveness out of this team that they can get, and they figure Laviolette's the guy, and let's get her done.
Well, I think I agree 100% with that, Mike. And I think you could probably say that about the entire National Hockey League.
Well, that's where I was going with this.
Every team has a little bit of a window. And, you have 3 years, you have 4 years, you have 5 where, your key players are going to get a little older, or they're going to be moving on, they're going to become free agents, whatever the case might be. Mm-hmm. So time is of essence to win a Stanley Cup in the National Hockey League. So teams are being a lot less patient now with their coaches than perhaps they were in the past. And, you look at Todd Reirden. 2 seasons. That's it. You're gone.
Oh, by the way, he was in the playoffs. It's not like he didn't make the playoffs.
Exactly. But he didn't win a Stanley Cup. And I guess in Washington now, obviously, the goal is a Stanley Cup because they've already won one. And I think that's the goal, obviously, with all 31, soon to be 32 teams. But that's where the patience comes in. And I think it's kind of like, you got 2 or 3 years. If you're getting to the conference finals or the Stanley Cup finals every year, you're going to stay. But if you're not, and you're losing out in the first round or second round 2 years in a row, there's a good chance you might be replaced.
Well, I think this. I think this is just going to add additional pressure in Toronto. It's enormous enough already playing in a city like this. Now, this maybe stating the obvious a little bit, but the next couple of moves better be designed or should be designed to make a real advancement. So the pressure's on not only Dubas, but Keefe over the next, I would say, 6-7 months.
I would have to say you're absolutely right. I mean, I think Kyle Dubas is under a lot of scrutiny right now. This team has not won a round in the playoffs since he's been hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's going to make some moves. Obviously, he's already started by moving Kapanen, which we've already talked about. I'm sure there's more moves to come. Well, I think there's more pressure on him than anybody. The problem is if he gets fired, then what happens to Keefe, because he's kind of his guy. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's like. New general manager comes in, he wants his own guy, and you can't blame them. I mean, they want somebody they can trust, someone they know that can get the best out of their players, and they're going to do whatever they can. Now, if the new GM comes in and thinks that Sheldon Keefe is a guy to do it, well, then he'll keep him. But chances are, if the general manager's moved, the coach will be too.
Well, we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks, because free agency, the draft, Stanley Cup final, all around the corner here. The dates are ticking. So there's going to be some interesting things to talk about going forward. Now, I'd just like to close this segment with a couple of personal observations in the sporting world. I'm catching Squid off guard in this one because I never gave my heads up on this, so I want to get his response. So, and this actually could be a little bit of a lead into free agency. The life isn't always greener on other pastures. Now, we heard Tom Ferguson a couple of weeks ago talk about, when we mentioned Torrey Krug as a possible candidate, maybe come to Toronto or some city like that, that Bruins have a system that's put in place that players leave that city and don't play the same way, sometimes as a rule. So now, as a Bills fan, and a very frustrated Bills fan over the last few years, I have to say I took great satisfaction, even though it was only week one, in seeing Mr. Tom Brady less than stellar on opening weekend in the NFL, getting dissed by his coach in the press, and that pain look on his face was worth every ounce of it. And I haven't seen it look like that since that massive ego of his took a hit playing in that foursome with Tiger, Phil, and Peyton. And by the way, Squid, if he's an 8 handicap, I'm a scratch, and I'm about 25 shots away from being a scratch.
Yeah, there's no way he's an 8, I can tell you that, unless he's playing where they're playing the U.S. Open now all the time, courses like that.
Yeah.
Possibly, no, he wouldn't be an 8.
He's not an 8.
He must be playing municipal courses that have no trees.
Well, and the second part of my observation is also, like, while I'm really on my rant here to give it to guys, isn't that such a shame that Kawhi Leonard got beat out the other night? And not only that, he took the gas, him and his guy he had to have to make it all work, Paul George, who absolutely horrible in Game 7, and were outdone by a Canadian, Jamel.
Murray.
Absolutely, and he got them. So you know what, guys, free agents, pay attention. I guess the only other good thing about all that is that big mouth owner of theirs. He can stuff that in his yap. Obviously, I remember him screaming and yelling when he was stealing the player from Toronto. So but that looks good on the ball. But anyway, there's my rant for the day on sports. But free agents, pay attention to that, because you never know.
It's going to be interesting. Very, very interesting. There's a lot of good free agents out there. So I'll definitely be waking up for that show.
Yes, exactly. Well, on that note, it's that time again where we've got to call it. We want to thank on our show today for Bruce Boudreau joining us and being so generous with his time with us. We also want to thank our friends at the Hockey News who cover all things pertaining to hockey. Go to thn.com/deal for the best value for your subscription to the Hockey News. Follow us at Squid and the Ultimate Leaf Fan on Twitter. My social page is the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Rick's Instagram page, Rick5. And guys, as always, we'd like to hear from you guys. Send us any of your thoughts or Don't give me any hack about Tom Brady or Kawhi Leonard. I was only joking.
Well,
guys.
I was
Okay,
going to, but anyway.
I was only joking. I was having a
I
little
think he's probably one of the best quarterbacks
ever.
probably in NFL history.
Oh, absolutely.
He's got to be in the top 5 or 10. Well, I mean, what's he won? 5 Super Bowls?
6, I think.
6? I mean, come on.
No, but why do you leave?
But, well, I don't know why he left. I mean, maybe he was sick and tired of Belichick. Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
but I mean, you're at the end of your career. Why put yourself in a position to look bad? And then Kawhi Leonard, if it's all about winning, why would you leave? And the sad part about that I'll be serious about is the fact that he could have used the Raptors and the Raptors could have used him, and they'd probably still be playing. That's the pity.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he left, made them make a trade before he would sign with the Clippers. Yeah, I know it's his hometown, but I mean, could you imagine Game 7, the Raptors, if they had him?
Yep.
I think they're moving on to they may even have won another title.
That's right. But again, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see. But let's get back to our real sport, the one that counts, hockey. We put all those others on the back burner now. But anyway, guys, again, follow us on our social networks. Listen, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week.